that tune is playing for you and not just in my headphones. I always wonder. I guess I should play one of these back and see if it's actually playing. The little intro song. Oh, okay. We'll just cancel doing that because I don't know what's going on in that other one. All right, so we are live. Praise the Lord. Um Wow, so dazzle. So it is time to wake up and smell the coffee. If you haven't already been drinking yours, you probably should get started. It's 5 o'clock. They say it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and I'm talking about coffee. Exactly. Right. Exactly. 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 So, where did I write down my little question? Okay. So, I was processing some things yesterday. We've got few little things we can chat about. Essentially, walking back through where I've seen a lot of people lately is, just in these places where there's like really hard stuff, like people are being hammered, like, day after day after day, or just by things that just don't seem like they're moving. You know what I mean? Like you feel like you're in limbo, you feel like you're stuck. You feel like that there's prophetic promise to some things. You know the truth about kind of some of the destiny things and some of the things that are promises for you, but you just feel like, it's like it's time for the manifestation. It's time for um the manifestation. And it reminds me, I have to look something up here. And hold on one second. Tells his servant to look again. Sorry, something about Elijah just came. Um Yes. All right. So Second Kings, where is this? Second Kings, First Kings. All right. So First King 18. There's a storm that's happening and a cloud is forming. Yes, there is. Okay. There were two things that just ran through my mind. Um, I'm going to read this. I'm going to start reading this verse. Let me make sure I got the version that I want. This is in where? Oh, I see. Oh, praise the Lord. Just pick your version here. All right, we can go with that. Okay. All right. So this is right after the big showdown on Mount Carmel with Elijah, where, obviously the God that answers by fire um, comes and and basically he makes a confrontation. The confrontation is there anybody in the land that's going to serve God? And if you are, you're going to have to make a decision. Are you going to serve the Baals? Or are you going to serve God? And he humiliates all the prophets of Baal, that come out. And Elijah gets kind of sarcastic, like, do you need more time, whatever. And then when it's time for the major showdown, he basically has them load the sacrifice with water. Let the God. Let me see if I can find that one part. Let's see. Okay, here we go. And so, um, all right. So then Elijah said to them, "I'm the only prophet of the Lord who's left, but Baal has 450 prophets." Kind of feels like we're outnumbered sometimes, doesn't it? Now bring two bulls. The prophets of Baal may choose whichever ones they wish and cut into pieces and lay it on the wood of the altar, but without setting fire to it. I will prepare the other bull, lay it on the wood on the altar, but not set fire to it. Then call upon the name of your God, and I'll call upon the Lord, the God who answers by setting fire to the wood is the true God. And all the people agreed. I love this answer by fire thing. Hmm. Hold on. When you got all kind of little things on your bald head like glasses and headphones. Um, so the Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "You go first. There are many of you. Of choose one of the bulls, prepare it, and call on the name of your God, but do not set the wood on fire." So then Elijah said to the so they prepared one of the bulls, they placed it on the altar, and they called on the name of Baal from morning until noontime, shouting, "Oh Baal, answer us!" But there were no reply of any kind. There was no reply. They danced, hobbling around the altar they had made. About noontime, Elijah began mocking them. You'll have to shout louder, he scoffed, for surely he is a god. Perhaps he's daydreaming or relieving himself, or maybe he's away on a trip, or is asleep and needs to be awakened. Right, right. All right, lost my little spot. Needs to be awakened. Oh, there it is. So they shouted louder, and following the normal custom, they cut themselves with knives. That sounds pleasant. And swords until the blood gushed out. They raved all afternoon until the evening time of the evening sacrifice, but there was no sound, no reply, no response. Then Elijah called to the people, "Come over here." They all crowded around him as he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. He took 12 stones, one to represent each of the 12 tribes of Israel, and he used the stones to rebuild the altar in the name of the Lord. Then he dug a trench large enough around the altar, enough to hold about 3 gallons. He piled wood on the altar, cut the bull into pieces, right? And then laid the pieces on the wood. Then he said, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour the water over the offering and the wood." Oh, this is so fun. After they'd done that, he said, "Do you do the same thing again?" And when they finished, he said, "Do it a third time." So then they did as he said, and the water ran round the altar and even filled the trench. At the usual time for offering of the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet walked up to the altar and prayed, "O God, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant." Get ready for seeing days like this, by the way, where we literally where there's the showdown between dark and light. It's gonna happen more and more and more frequently. Um, with the God who answers by fire come. He said, "Prove that I have done all of this at your command. O Lord, answer me. Answer me so these people will know that you, O Lord, are the God, our God, and that you have brought them back to yourself." Immediately, he's already prophesying about people turning from Baal to into the kingdom. It's really wild that you've brought them back to yourself. Immediately, the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. And when all of the people saw it, they fell face down and cried out, "The Lord, He is God. Yes, the Lord is God." Then Elijah commanded, "Seize all the prophets of Baal. Don't let a single one escape." By the way, Jesus is toppling the altars of the enemy all around us, um, toppling the broken system, idols, just all these altars that have been built to Baal, even in our culture, and been built to all these false systems, these things that are really, really broken, and these patterns, and just things that are profoundly broken in our culture. Like he's tearing them down. He's tearing down the altars, and we're not going to be worshiping at the altar of trans everything anymore. And that's not a statement of judgment. That's a statement of, I want to see those people get healed. But before you couldn't even talk about them getting healed, right? You get in trouble. Then Elijah commanded, "Seize all the prophets, don't let one escape." So they seized them all. Elijah took them down to the Kishon Valley and killed them there. Then Elijah said to Ahab, Go get a drink, go get something to eat and drink, for I hear a rainstorm coming." Okay, right after we just witnessed like the biggest showdown where the God that answers by fire, the God that Elijah knew, the God that he called on all of his ancestors came and completely obliterated that. You know, it's this crazy holy moment where people are suddenly just convicted and thrown to the ground and say, "Yes, the Lord is God." We're gonna see more and more of that too, where people just like radically just flip and turn to Jesus just on a dime. But I think it's very interesting that after this moment, the first thing he talks about is, "I hear a mighty rainstorm coming." Now remember, there had been a famine in the land and there also been a drought, but there was rain coming. So Ahab went to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bowed low to the ground, and prayed with his face between his knees. Then he said to his servant, "Go and look out toward the sea." The servant went and looked, and then returned to Elijah and said, "I didn't see anything." 7 times Elijah told him to go and look. Finally, the seventh time, number of completion, his servant told him, "I saw a little cloud about the size of a man's hand rising from the sea." Can I just tell you that there is a cloud the size of a man's fist rising? And there is a response that is coming to the de-altered Baal in our culture. As Jesus topples these giants and topples the giants, the strongholds, the things that have been held you captive in a place, whether it's physically with your body, whether it's financially or otherwise, there are strongholds that are being torn down. God is doing some things that only he can do, that no one can stop him from doing. He has determined in his heart that he is going to do this, that he is going to usher us into the manifestation time and hour, present continuous, where manifestation is our norm. Okay. So here you have one of the biggest manifestations that ever happened in the Bible. I mean, this was huge. I mean, fire coming down from heaven, consuming this sopping wet, water overflowing, everything, even burns everything down to the dust, right? And so you have this huge flip. And then, Elijah takes those prophets and he kills the prophets of Baal. It's like, so when God does something to take down the demonic altars in our culture and our lives, there's going to be a sudden release of manifestation that takes place. The manifestation was the fire, right? But there's still more. It's not just the fire. The fire is the manifestation that says, this is who God is. Wake up. God is here, right? And so many of us, we know that part. We have seen in our own lives that the altars of the enemy are toppling, that God is doing something in our culture that's releasing righteousness into the land, that's raising that standard, right? That we're seeing miraculous stuff. I was talking to a friend earlier about how I could scroll through my Instagram because of the things that I like, and I could see places where Jesus is being worshiped in the street in the Netherlands, all over the place. In fact, Chicago is one of the biggest places right now where there's people actually worshiping in the streets, and also Atlanta. It's happening right here. It's like people are being just lit by heaven, right? And so the irony is, you look over here or whichever direction you want to look, and you see something that looks like hell is in control. And hell is not in control. Hell is way not in control. Okay. Hell, I mean, what God is doing right now and toppling some of these altars is some of the strongholds that are the biggest that have strongholds that have strongholds attached to them, strongholds attached to them. It's this ripple thing, right? And he's tearing these things down, and there's going to be a manifestation present continuous that we're going to continue to see. We are going to be living in the era of manifestation, where manifestation is more our norm, and it's what happens as we basically engage with heaven on our own, living out of our union with Jesus. Manifestation is going to be the mall, the mall, the hallmark of this sons and daughters, manifest sons and daughters revolution that we're seeing. And so um the next part's fun. He goes through and he says, after the seventh time, he goes back and looks, right? And I believe, yes, there had been a drought in the land. I love it. For 3 years, there had been a drought in the land. So this is kind of fun. After the manifestation of fire, what broke open? The rain. When the altars of the enemy were toppled and leveled, and the fire of God came and answered the prayer of Elijah, and you watched a nation turn back to God. Um, Interesting story. Side note: listen to the story. There's an interview with Tucker Carlson and the president of El Salvador. Listen to their story about how a nation began to pray and what happened to everything in their culture. Um, One of the safest places to live right now. So anyway, so after this whole thing of hey Michael, there you are. Uh, well, thanks for joining. Um, were you wanting to join? I love it. Or were you just clicking and you did that and you weren't planning? You're fine. Hold on. You're fine. Okay. All right. That was awesome. I look up, I see Michael. Whoa, there's Michael. All right, that was awesome. Can you do that more often? Is that like translating when you do that? Like when you pop on like that? 'Cause if you had had my background behind you, then I would have known you were in the room. That would have been even more fun. So after this, you see these altars toppled, right? You see the Baals are wiped out. The God comes that answers by fire, and then they've been in a drought. So what comes next is the end of the dry season. The dry season, I'm going to use that as a metaphor. The end of the drought is over because the rain is now coming. And so that's what we're in right now, okay? So manifestation is the rain. The rain comes on the heels of the drought being ended, which all coalesces with this whole thing of a nation turning back to God and seeing God answer by fire. Part of, I think, the struggle that a lot of people have had, I know that I talk to, is you've seen the God that answers by fire, but you haven't seen the manifestation. And you're in this little kind of window here where it's like, I know. And if I think about that little fist-sized cloud is kind of like this. I'm pregnant, not me personally. That would be a different show. But I'm pregnant with my manifestation. I'm busting at the seams, ready to deliver, right? So shall God bring to the point of delivery and not give birth. Of course, we're going to give birth, right? And so you're in this transition that may feel long in some ways, and, one of the things, my wife, I've had this conversation where we're so used to thinking about the good thing manifesting down the road. We don't think like Mary, who pulled whatever was future into now when she asked her son to create wine, to turn water to wine at the wedding. He said, "It's not my time." And she's like, if you get the chosen version of that, it's like, then if not now, when, right? And so, Mary pulled something from a future time. We are not limited to time. We are not. Everything is not set in a specific time. There are things that I believe God does, but that he initiates that no one can stop in his in the places that he chooses to do that in the times that he does. I do get that. But as far as like a lot of other things, I think it's a religious kind of construct for us to always think, well, it's not our season. We're in the wilderness, we're in this. If we cut through all of our wrong perceptions about our access to heaven, when you have access to heaven and you can ascend and you can engage with heaven on your own and you're living in the reality of heaven, like Paul, then essentially what you begin to pray begins to change. It changes a lot because from from the unascended place, let's say, you're the kid banging on the door, you're the orphan, we're banging on the door, we're trying to knock it down, we're pressing in, we're trying to persevere, we're trying to tear a door down. The difference in this era and the previous era that these two eras are overlapping, okay? And one of the people that has some of the greatest language for this right now is my wife will put the name. Um, I can't think of her name. I'll think of it in a minute. Gordana, not no Gordano. Gia. Oh, put her name in there. Fiorella. Thank you. So, she has a lot to say about this right now. But we're in this place of everything. Time is being bent in some very interesting ways. Okay, and so these ages are overlapping. One is based on a hierarchy, one is based on our union with Jesus and manifest sons and daughters of God, carrying it all, having it all. We are the revival, we're all those things. And so in this era, part of the way we function is we get real-time revelation and we have real-time things begin to happen in front of us. We are not accustomed to manifestation. We are accustomed to banging at the door year after year, month after month, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And part of that is, when you think about if I were, when I put Jesus in the chair next to me, which I do often in the car or in this room, or I engage, like, again, Michael, if I engage my sanctified imagination and have an encounter with the Lord, whether it's going to the library of heaven or to the throne room or wherever it is that we're engaging with, the revelation that you receive there, third heaven revelation, is real time revelation. Now, it doesn't mean that lickety split something's going to happen just because you say it's going to happen. But what I'm saying is there is a difference. There is a difference between my petition and prayer and my, coming to God with my petition, which is comes from a model of I've got to do this thing that I've got to keep doing. And the model has this subtle form of works built into it. And it has this other subtle form of, performance, you know, um, see, when you're living in an accelerated landscape, part of what makes easy what we're doing is other people have already paid the price for what we're getting. It's that thing that I talk about all the time, um, you know, Heidi Baker, the Lord telling her I'm going to do 6 months in a generation what I did in 36 years. Acceleration and the over sowing equation that we are, the plowman overtaking the reaper era that we're living in. Because of what has already been sown, so much has been broken into for us. Okay. An example in the natural and spiritual would be look at the chosen. The chosen broke open a whole a whole hole in the media realm that a lot of things will come up behind and follow. They broke out of Hollywood. They did something that wasn't Hollywood based. They crowdsourced funded it. They did something that was done profoundly well and is all around the world right now. They forged something in the spirit that others will come behind and benefit. So there's a natural aspect of and a spiritual aspect of coming behind the ones who have sown before us. So if you think about the people that have sown into this day, right? This last act of the play, if you will, you know, all the saints from all the way from the very beginning have all sown into something, many sown into something that they never saw, right? So there's been a sowing, and there's going to be a culmination in this avalanche of revival that takes place on the planet because of all that's been sown. That's where you get to Amos 9. The plowman overtakes the reaper. I love the message version. Things will happen so fast, your head will spin. How do we do acceleration? How do we do condensed time? How do we do recompense and have recompense of the many years that are behind us that we paid and lost? Everybody that I know has lost a lot to be where they are today, and they dug deep wells during long seasons, and they cultivated a place of intimacy with Jesus, right? And in doing that, it's like if you had a cave. My wife and I haven't decided whose analogy this was first, but we'll just share it today. And it was a picture I saw a long time ago too. Um, but if you took a cavern and you go in it and you turn out the lights, everybody that goes through Kentucky goes into one of those things where you go in the cavern, they turn the lights out. One of the things they do, right? And you can't see your hand in front of your face. But imagine that that cavern has precious stones, built into the walls that have been forged into the very cavern itself. You got diamonds and rubies and precious stones forged in there. And you turn out the lights, you would see the glow of the embers and the stones and the wall that hold the light. There would still be light. So many of us, we made it through many seasons where we relied on the things that had been forged deep within us, right? That there was light in us, there was some reserve in us, there was something that was forged in fire in us. And we got to places when it got really hard, no matter how mad we got or how disillusioned we got, one thing we knew during most of those seasons in our life was, where am I going? Whom do I have in heaven but you? Like, where are we going to go? You're the one that has the words to eternal life. Like, where are we going? And so many of those seasons were marked by intense survival because of the stones, the precious stones that have been forged in fire. There was something still in us that was lit during some of the darkest seasons of our life. The man at the pool of Bethesda is an excellent example of this. The man never answered the question right. Jesus said, do you want to get well? He never said yes. But Jesus saw past the man. He saw the bruised reed that was promised would not break, and he saw the smoldering wick that he promised would never get put out in anyone. And he answered the question in the prayer that the man wasn't able to articulate. So Jesus is answering the prayer that you cannot articulate. Can I submit to you that you are the prayer? You are the prayer. Your life is the prayer. So there's an expansion of this metaphor of what it means to pray. You're breathing life, and every moment of you, you are the prayer. Your life is a prayer. And so Jesus is not just responding to what you articulate. If that were the case, we would all be in a pickle. Well, I didn't pray it right. I didn't get all the right words in. It's kind of like this too. If Jesus only did when you showed up what you thought you were supposed to do, then you would walk away 99% of the time thinking, I only did about 10% of what God wanted. I didn't do enough. Well, that's not real graceful. When you show up 100% of what God wants to do, when you walk in the room carrying who you carry, when you show up it all starts popping. And whether you thought of the words to say, whether you forgot 10 lines of your sermon, whether you forgot the list that you brought in with words and knowledge that you had already been listening to God for, it does it doesn't matter. The game is about showing up. When you come in and you carry the oracles of heaven, you carry the Ark of the Covenant, you carry the kingdom, everything is inside of you. When you show up, things start popping, things start happening. He always does exceedingly beyond whatever we could think or imagine. And if it were all on our shoulders to do, if we forgot the altar call and nobody and then we walk away saying, "Well, nobody got healed because we forgot." Really? No. He's always doing. He's always working with what when everybody shows up and brings what they carry, that's called a like explosive kairos fire, present continuous, and the moment that blows up it becomes exponential. Okay, so you look at what happens in a room and you got a bunch of people worshiping who all carry the totality of the kingdom inside of them, and you get something explosive that happens. We have people at our local church right now who weekly, as during the worship sets, fall in divisions. This is like evangelical, no, not evangelical, I would say, Bap Baptisty, evangelical, lightly charismatic, mixture, megachurch. You would never suspect that at Bethlehem Church here in Winder, Georgia, that people fall in divisions when the worship starts. So, I just say that to say there's always so much more happening than what you can ever imagine. It's always there. So let me finish this little passage real quick. So, um, so then Elijah has this little guy, his servant, this little guy that sounded dismissive, his servant. We're all servants, praise the Lord. He tells him to go. He said, I saw a little cloud about the size of a man's hand rising from the sea. That's all he needed. Can I tell you that there is a little cloud the size of a man's fist right now that has your name and your manifestation written on it? When Jesus topples the altars of the enemy in our culture and in our world, then what gets released is the manifestation of everything that has been held back and held, however, it's been stopped or stymied or whatever. There is nothing left but the manifestation. So we are in metaphorically this stage present continuous in this era, and that's what makes it look different. We're learning how to govern, learning how to navigate, learning how to navigate a terrain that's totally new. We have this brand new circuit board inside of us that has an expanded capacity and has places in us to go and to engage with heaven that we have not encountered yet. Okay. So we're loaded, we're expanded, and we're in a place where everything is about manifestation. So he goes back, he says, "Hurry to Ahab and tell him, climb into your chariot and go back home. If you don't hurry, the rain will stop you." And soon the sky was black with clouds. A heavy wind brought a terrific rainstorm. Where was that rainstorm before? All there was a cloud this big, fist. And within minutes, this is like right after we've had like 3 years of drought, the whole nine yards. Wow. Soon the sky was black with clouds. A heavy wind brought a terrific rainstorm, and Ahab left quickly for Jezreel. Then the Lord gave special strength to Elijah. He tucked his cloak in his belt and ran ahead of Ahab's chariot all the way to the entrance of Jezreel. If that isn't a prophetic sign of what it looks like to be a forerunner, I don't know what is. So I just think that's incredible. This is before the $6 million man. I was really impressed with the $6 million man, but this guy running faster than the chariot and the storm coming that quickly as a strong wind blows in a storm that comes from a cloud this big. I mean, in Georgia, I have to admit, we could have rain that comes out of the blue, probably more so in the last year or two, minimum, maximum, where the forecast doesn't say rain, particularly up here in Northeast Georgia. There's no rain in the forecast, and then but we'll end up getting rain. And so it's just very interesting how just the weather itself, it's like how rain can come from nowhere. And for these guys, it came from that small little fist. That's where we're living. So get ready because you're going to be running, outrunning a chariot as you see the storm come in with all of the rain and all of the breakthrough and all of the manifestation. It's like the manifestation of all things is here. It's a present continuous mindset that we need to step into because that's what it means to live from revelation. Old school, old old, regime, if you will, these two ages overlapping this previous age. We weren't living from revelation. We didn't know what ascending was. A lot of us, we knew basic charismatic things, speaking in tongues and healing, but the accessing of heaven, the engagement with angels, all of those things were not part of your typical low key charismatic palette. And those are things that are all on the table. It's one of the reasons I'm doing Angel Agents. I want to normalize, be a part of normalizing and our expectation and our engagement with the angelic realm. Um, so here's the thing that kind of came to me, and I'm gonna wrap with the prayer of Jabez, day 5, like I've been doing. In this season where many of us have been in this place where you feel like you're either stuck or suspended, one or the other, and you know that you have seen the little cloud the size of a fist, so you know that it's coming, but it's almost as if we got like suspended in time, like between the time that little cloud, between the sighting of the cloud and the sky was black with clouds and a heavy wind that brought a terrific rainstorm. We're in between those two little spaces, okay? And so, in this little place where we feel suspended and kind of stuck, I know the enemy has played on people, okay? And it's like and it's always about distraction, it's always about accusation, it's always about lying, okay? And for me, one of the places that I would retreat to a lot and that I kind of describe my summer this way was when you get to the place where you don't have any reserves, what do you do? And so part of the enemy's strategy is to drive you to the place of no reserves, right? And then once you're there where you feel like you have no reserves in you, those are the places when you have no reserves that you tend to find out what's inside your heart. Okay. It's like when the fire is really burning hot, where do you go? And there's a couple of directions that we tend to go, and both of them are not healthy. One is to accuse God. So it was really revelatory for me, honestly, on a practical level, when I was hearing somebody we were talking about Resilience, the book by John Etheridge in our small group. And they were talking about reserves. And I, through the summer, I found myself saying in those dark times, I kept saying to God, "You went too far." And when they were talking, I realized what I was actually saying. I was saying, I've gone so far beyond my reserves that I feel burnt to a crisp and I feel like I have nothing inside of me. part of the goal of the enemy from COVID forward, honestly, and we could talk about other times too, but specifically during those times, from COVID forward, was to extinguish every reserve that you and I had, and as a people had spiritually, emotionally, and otherwise, was to destroy the place of reserve so that we would be so exhausted, so that we would be so tired, so that we would be so worn out. How do you actually get a real dictator in the course of a day if they would have gotten their way? How do you get a people to submit? Number 1, they gotta be at war with each other. Number 2, you have to cause constant strain, constant stress, constant trauma, all of those things. And then number 3, you have to destroy the reserves that they have inside of them. And when you do that, then you can bring people to a place where they will yield to things that they would previously not have yielded to. I'll yield more to the control. I'll yield more to the places where, literally, where the whole agenda that came with all of that to be controlled, to be manipulated, to be shut down, to whatever. If you destroy their reserves, they'll be more likely to say yes to that than if they didn't. When you have reserves, you always have fight in you, right? One of the ways you know you have reserves is you got a fight inside of you, and that fight doesn't go down easy. You may beat me down to the ground, but I'll come back up swinging. The way that you know that you don't have any reserves is you feel like laying down and dying. And you feel like there's nothing that's going to bring you back up, and you lose your hope, and you get into this loop that runs in a hard drive in the background. It just keeps looping. And so what I got stuck in was a loop of the enemy convincing me in my no reserve place that it was over, it was done, and all of that. He wanted to destroy us by destroying everything in us, around us, by destroying things in our culture, by bringing in agendas and things that would further isolate and further tear us down and further keep everything on fire in these cities and whatnot. All the lawlessness parade that we've been watching, right? Which thankfully is changing. And so when you're in that place, there's two places that I tend to go. One is to blame God, the other is to go inward and try to figure out, well, what's wrong with me? All right, when you go to the "what's wrong with me" place, you're trying to find the magic bullet to what you didn't get right so that you can get it right so that God can do what he wants to do. It ain't happening. There's no magic bullet. The two places are to accuse God or to turn inward toward myself and basically accuse myself and wanting to exact justice within myself and subvert the work of the cross. Right? The only way through anything is always through the cross. If I'm if I'm not letting myself off the hook, or if I'm berating myself, or if I'm living and stewing in self-contempt because I believe, or I'm stewing in shame, believing that I was saying these things during the summer. I mean, it's embarrassing now, but saying things like, I understood Psalm 22. Like, why did you create me? Why was I born? Like, you really hate me. You really, really despise me. You see, the fruit of turning inward is self-accusation, and then there's no hope in that. Where do you go after that? There's no place to go, right? I mean, if I'm the problem, because God can't be the problem, there's that place in the middle where it's like, I want to throw a stone this way, or I want to throw it at myself. The one inward is either going to be birthed out of religion or self contempt, or both. And so religion says, I didn't get it right. So I got to figure out how to get it right. And so we spin our wheels. Self-condemned says and is basically agrees with shame, that agrees with the enemy, that God is not present, he's not here, he's not for me, he's not with me, he's not in this. So therefore, you know, there's something deeply, deeply flawed with me. And I would say that to God, like, I must be some stepchild to you. Like, what is so wrong with you that you can't love me? And so one of the things that I realized last night, if you find yourself in one of those places where it's like you go to God's fault or my fault, both are bad because we don't want to live in the tension in the middle. And it's hard at times to live in that tension, is to ask a question. I wrote this down. I said, the enemy wants to keep us in a place of accusing God instead of asking a question. What is it in me that is, and here's one question. You know, I know enough to know that when an emotion is larger in me than what the context is, that it's pulling on history, it's pulling on triggers, it's pulling on trauma, it's pulling on something else, right? But when you're trapped in it, we become blind and we don't always see, like when you come down the road a little piece in retrospect, you say, God, Scott, you're so stupid. You should have been asking this question a long time ago. But when the enemy gets a foothold into a mindset, into our heart, and he's got a lie that he's propagating, and that lie begins to gain some momentum inside of me, then everything that tries to come in at truth gets really obliterated by the lie because the lie only grows. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it becomes more powerful and more powerful the more I yield in fear and shame to the lie. So this thing becomes expansive. It's like the leaven in the bread. If the leaven in the bread is fear, it's going to explode and create a whole loaf of bread that's nothing but fear. And so that leaven in the bread for me was growing. And so the thing I had to come back to was to remind myself. You ever notice, like, if you tell yourself what you are or aren't going to do before you go do something, that you'll probably do it? I remember a girl in my Bible that said it this way. She said, "My father always told me, determine what you're going to do before you go to the party and what you won't do. Because if you go with the attitude that I'll just do whatever, you'll do whatever. But if you go into the party determining that I'm not going to do this, this is not going to happen to me, I'm not going to allow this to happen, or whatever it is, then what you determine on the front end going into that party, that dangerous scenario, essentially you're not going to do. You're going to have something in you that says, no, I'm not going to do that. But if I go and I say, oh, I'm just going to see what happens, I'm going to be like the lazy dog in front of the fire. I'm just going to go to this party and see what happens. And something starts to happen. Suddenly you're caught off guard. Suddenly you're caught unaware and you find yourself in a situation you never wanted to be in, but you never did anything to say anything about what you were going to do or not do. It was the greatest advice. It was like, making a determination, and a lot of times we can do that when, this happens naturally in our lives. When you make a mistake, or let's say, for example, you encounter a dysfunctional conversation with a relative every time you get on the phone, right? And so if you just continue to get on the phone and have the same dysfunctional conversation where you leave angry and yada yada, then you're going to continue that pattern. But if you determine beforehand that you're going to have a boundary in place, that Aunt Martha, I appreciate you and I love you, but if you continue to berate me, I'm going to have to get off the phone. I love you and I will talk to you again, but I won't stay on the phone with you. By determining what I'm going to say or do before I go into that, I walk into it and I draw a boundary that I won't go past. Does that make sense? I'm drawing a boundary for myself. But when I don't do that, I will let what's going to happen, and it will continue to be a pattern in my life. Patterns change when they're interrupted. Okay. So part of it is recognizing what my pattern is. And then what is it I'm going to do to preemptively tell myself what I'm going to do when I'm in that situation. And so we do this all the time, right? We realize that Every time we get on the phone with Aunt Martha, there's gonna be a fight. Well, when you thought that through and decided that you were gonna have a plan before you went on the phone, then you don't get caught off guard. One of the places the enemy traps us and brings us into agreement and alignment with his plan is by catching us unaware. And when we're caught unaware, we're floundering in this moment. And then the temptation to the mindset, whatever it is going to be screaming. So he's going to be screaming the accusation, the temptation to do whatever it is that we do that's dysfunctional is going to be there louder than it ever has been before. And so the likelihood that I will take the bait is much higher if he catches me off guard. So one of the things that I was realizing that I needed to begin to do, the pattern that I was in was I got into a pattern when my reserves were gone of accusation with God and or accusation against myself. Both the cross paid for this and paid for both, really. He paid so that we wouldn't have to have an accusation. We'd be able to actually step into something. And I realized that I had let something catch me so far off guard because the thing that I was saying when I was saying, "You took me too far," was I was essentially saying, I was caught off guard by the barrage that kept on coming. And when I was caught off guard, I was more susceptible to fear. And when I was caught off guard, I was more susceptible to the lie. And I was more susceptible to believing the lie that was going to agree with the shame that was in me, that was going to try to convince me that God wasn't in my equation, that I was going to be left to my own devices again, and that the pattern of trauma, the pattern of hopelessness, the pattern of loss, the pattern, see, the enemy was trying to draw me back into the pattern. And the pattern was so large and so deep in terms of how deep it was dug as a groove in my brain and in my heart and my soul, that the pattern was always going to win because it was the thing that I knew. And when I caught me off guard, I ran to the thing that I knew instead of into the thing I didn't know or the thing that felt wonderfully dangerous, like the presence of the Lord, or into something that Jesus was actually putting out there for me to embrace. But when you're locked in, you're locked in. You don't see till you see. That's why I would say sometimes I have to have an encounter to have an encounter, right? And so the thing that I realized that I need to be able to do, it's like I've been in the pattern. When I find myself in a place of accusing me, hey, Linda, or accusing God, I'm going to pause and ask a question. And the question is going to be, it could be different every time. For me, because my temptation would be to step into the orphan or step into the victim or step into whatever, the question is going to be because all of those things are part of our trauma responses and our history. Is what am I not seeing rightly when I'm sitting here saying, because I said these words out loud, if I wouldn't do to my kids what you do to me. God's not having a problem with my statement. He's large enough for it. When our kids do the same thing, when they're, 11 years old and they're screaming, I hate you, we're pretty much large enough for that. And we don't have to get into a dysfunctional drag out fight because my kid said at 10 years old, 11 years old, that he hates me. He doesn't hate me. I know he doesn't hate me. Right. But I know that right now he's mad. So, I mean, Jesus in the same way is large enough for us. He's not afraid of the mess. But in the middle of that, the way that I subvert the pattern is to interrupt the pattern with something else. Patterns, the only way they change is they have to be subverted. And when they are subverted, they have to have something else that comes in their place. It's the whole brain science thing with Dr. Caroline Leaf. It's like your thoughts create RNA strands. You literally are not your DNA because your thoughts can change your DNA. Okay. So if I have a pattern of living out of a certain place based on disappointment, based on hope deferred or hopelessness, etc., then I have to interrupt the pattern. Part of what she does in her program is she gets you to interrupt the pattern with the word of God, and you regroove, you take that plastic brain of yours and mine, and we reset it to something else. When something is set into a pattern, it just needs to be broken and reset. That's the beauty of our brain. When you think about your brain creating RNA strands, that actually creates biology that changes things, and you realize that Romans 12:1 and 2 takes on a whole new meaning. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The renewing of my mind, which creates RNA strands, which changes my DNA, which can change my body, which can change. You see what it can change, 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 change. My thoughts change my circumstance. My thoughts change my body. My thoughts provoke manifestation. My thoughts can do all of those things. And so, we are what we think, we manifest what we believe. All those things are true. So, the engagement for me is to ask myself the question, Father, where is my thinking or perception askew? Everything is perception. When the orphan in me is saying, I wouldn't treat my kids like you treat me. Okay. If I just step out of that just for a moment and be a parent myself, and my kid were saying that to me, what would I say to them? Well, essentially, I would recognize that they were believing a lie based on a place of disappointment or anger or frustration or whatever. Right. So if I ask the question in that place, then I'm saying change the way I see. Okay. The man in Mark chapter 8, who Jesus prayed for twice in the city of Bethsaida, was known for a cult. And while that man was in the dark place, it says Jesus was his sighted guide. So in the dark place, he would lead him, figuratively speaking, by the hand as his guide through the dark places. Many of us have lived a lot of seasons like that, where the embers inside of that cavern were glowing and they became the light place in the dark. And then he brings him outside the city gate. And when he gets outside the city gate, outside of his circumstance, outside of what was familiar, outside of the warfare and all the occult and all that, when he takes them outside of everything that has been patterned, that has been familiar, that is his norm, that is packed with lots of fun little warfare. I mean that sarcastically, and brings them outside of that gate and into a new space. Then, when he says, look up, and the man looks up and he sees everything perfectly, he gets to see. Sometimes I have to be led outside the gate by my sighted guide so that I can look up and see something differently. The issue is not, if I had to establish a practice for myself, it would be this: rather than let the accusation fly to heaven or fly to myself, let me ask the question in the middle. What about how I'm seeing? Because perception is reality and perception is everything. So the question and the thing that I have to look at in every scenario is, What am I seeing wrongly? Then, when we go back to when I determine ahead of time what I'm going to do or not do when I'm caught off guard. See, being caught off guard, you don't know what you're going to. I used to make a joke. I don't know what'll fly out of my mouth to catch me off guard, right? The enemy is always wanting to catch you off your guard. If but in certain in scenarios, if I've predetermined that I'm not going to go there, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to pause and ask a question. Then when the enemy catches me off guard, I will already have a built-in defense mechanism that is a positive defense inside of me to address what he's doing, and I won't be caught off guard. I will say, "Okay, Lord, what are you doing? This is an opportunity for you to do something, Lord," as opposed to the victim. This is an opportunity for me to see something differently. Where do I need to see something differently about how I perceive you as a father? Where do I need to see something differently about where my heart doesn't still know love? Where do I need to see something differently where I've been caught in a loop that I don't know how to get out of? Where do I need to see something differently? Perception is everything. So then that's what I say. The one encounter, I've got to have sometimes an encounter to have an encounter so that I can see differently. And so let's just say that that'll be something anybody that wants to agree with me can agree with me. So, Lord, I'm going to come out of my pattern. I'm going to come out of my pattern, whatever my pattern is that fuels my unbelief, that fuels my fear, that fuels a lot of things in me that are not connected to my faith and not connected to manifestation. I'm going to come out of agreement with all of those things. I'm going to determine and ahead of time that I'm not going to accuse you and I'm not going to berate myself. I'm going to ask a question. And whenever I feel caught off guard by the enemy, I'm going to pause and ask a question. I'm going to ask, "What are you doing?" I'm going to ask, "How do you want me to see this?" I'm going to say the unseen real, thank you, Michael Van Vlymen, for that part, is more real than what I'm looking at. I'm going to say that this is not that. This is not the same thing I've been through. This is not the trauma that I've known. This is not the same trigger. This is not the same response. It's not. I'm going to assume that you're good and you're for me and that you want to answer the question that I pose to you in my union with you because you are all about changing the way I see so that I can come in alignment with the blueprint of heaven and the blueprint of my destiny, the blueprint of everything that you have that you want to release on earth as it is in heaven, in me, through me, around me, etc. All right. Oh, I didn't know we were going to do all that. That was fun. All right. So, day 5, we'll end with this. Jabez, knowing his continuing need, kept calling on the name of God. Bless me indeed. Do in my life unhindered everything you had in mind when you created me. God, I love that. So, Father, remind us if we were with you before the foundations of the earth, before we were ever in a parent's body, remind us of who we were and what you created us to do and be. Solidify that one. I love that one. Remind me. Do in my life unhindered everything you had in mind when you created me. Yes, before the foundations of the earth, and remind us who that person is and what you said about us. Accomplish your perfect will unobstructed by me. Enlarge my life and make my character match my assignment. In other words, let the landscape of my heart match the landscape that we're living in. Show me your glory. Be with me. I must have the touch of your gracious presence. Go before me, carry me through, come behind me. Give me your words, give me your wisdom and power. Keep me from temptation and deliver me from evil. Direct my steps away from all that is not of you. Keep me in the fear of the Lord and the righteousness of Jesus Christ, and let me stand in the gap for others. Let me not hurt others nor their reputations, and thereby temporarily separate myself from your pleasure. All your covenant intervention that I count on is available against me when I lift my hands or my words to attack others. Let me read that again. All your covenant intervention that I count on is available against me when I lift my hands or words to attack others. I got it. So it's available always, but it's against me when I do the other thing. I got you. Attack others. I don't want to feel your I don't want to feel your intervention against me on behalf of others when I am their accuser. Open heaven's storehouses because I'm fervently seeking you, your presence, and your glory. Amen. I like that prayer, Jabez. Pretty good. All right, so blessings. Hmm, if this was helpful, share it. Um, I'm happy to say that hopefully this will be the last 10-day cycle I do with this book coming out on Audible. I just did I told you before with Audible, every correction you make, it's 10 more days before it comes out on Audible. So I did my last little round of things that it said I need to do, so it should be coming out. And I am working on the 30-day journey to sonship, which is a devotional for men that is the companion to the absent man. And that will be coming out soon in Kindle. Um, Also, of course, in paperback and then ultimately Audible. So still working on several projects at one time. So blessings and I love the interaction. So talk to me.